CEO of OTI. I've been in the controls and automation business for 25 years.
My indoor air quality sensors are telling me I need to ventilate the space more.
The new construction world is still so driven by that first cost metric. The challenge with being an MSI only, that is only executing MSI work, is one, there's just not enough of it out there. Once you can demonstrate the depth of knowledge you have about the building because you've been there from, let's say, design all the way through, the FM provider is actually not as difficult to engage with as you might think. With COVID, with buildings being largely unoccupied, they really had systems that were down that they just didn't even know about. We've actually got to be tracking, monitoring, maintaining this stuff so that when we're trying to make decisions that are real money, real business down the road, we're making it with a lot of really good data.
We're back for another episode of The Download with Joe. Quite a few kicking off over the next few weeks. As always, I'm here with Joe. He's, I think, in Boulder at home. And we're joined with Brian from OTI. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Hey, Brian.
Good to hang with you guys.
Most will know you, especially for the people that tune into this series between Joe and myself. But let's say they don't. Give us the high-level overview as to who Brian Turner is.
Yeah, CEO of OTI. I've been in the controls and automation business, both industrial process control and building automation for 25 years, basically since I got out of high school. Studied human factor psychology in college. I got a master's MBA with a technology focus, and really have been in this industry, everything from building technician to project manager to sales, and then eventually into leadership. Covered the gamut from just pure controls to software development to distribution to now as a Master Systems Integrator and controls contractor. So got a lot of the different experience, enjoyed it, love this industry. It's a great place to learn something new every day.
Various roles, various parts of the value chain, really just a wealth of experience. A lot of people haven't necessarily peeled back the fact that there's the OEMs that you hear about, but there's a whole bunch of pieces that get the controls from the big OEM into your building. So anyway,
right. Yeah.
And from a personal level, rumor has it that you are a closet Manchester United fan. I just want to put all speculation to one side. Is that true?
That is completely false. No, I do bleed red, but it's more Liverpool red than Man U red.
Yeah, I'm not sure many people who will watch this can see what's in the background, but big Liverpool fan.
I mean, yeah, it's hidden behind my chair just for you, Lewis. But yeah,
it's painful. It's painful. I've had to remove my background there just because it's the old days. Well,
you just don't want the conversation.
Yeah, every time someone sees a picture of Manchester United, they start asking questions, and yeah, it feels like I need a therapy session every time someone brings it up. So I've had to remove it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Chelsea had a horrible year last year, and this year they look better. So things change fast in the Premiership.
That's what happens when you buy 20 players.
Yeah. Well, I know. Yeah, the money thing.
Like an NFL roster. Brian, we've wanted to get you on for some time. There's obviously been some changes with what you were doing last year to what you're doing now, and we'll obviously talk about that for a couple of minutes towards the end. But when it comes to what you do and also just the industry in general, there's so much talk, and I think it's fair to say noise around MSI, and confusion around what it actually means, how to integrate it into buildings or into projects, like who does what, when to bring them in. And I just think there isn't many individuals who has been there and done that, and obviously got the experience that you have from a controls contractor, tech vendor, and obviously an MSI. So it should be a good episode. There's lots to discuss, and I think let's just start with something we spoke about a couple of weeks ago is like the definition of MSI, which is debatable. Everyone has their own opinion. Why do you think when people talk about MSI, it tends to be fairly divisive in terms of like people have their own definitions?
I would say I don't want to call it divisive. I would say that the MSI definition is led by your experience. And there's lots of different types of organizations that do some or all of the MSI scope. So you'll have everything from consulting firms executing some MSI scope. You'll have software manufacturers doing MSI scope. You'll have controls contractors doing MSI scope. You'll have business integrators who are kind of bleeding over into the operational technology world, doing some MSI scope. And so every one of those kinds of organizations is going to have a different view on how deep or how integrated the MSI really is. If you
And
look at
MSI,
MSIs, yeah,
real quick, I was going to say MSI,
yeah.
Master Systems Integrator, different than a systems integrator, just for those listening who hear the term. Anyway, keep going, Brian. I just wanted to.
Yeah, and it's not even our term, right? It's a term that comes from IT and potentially even industrial automation, where it has the definition for those segments as well. So you end up with people coming at this from various backgrounds, from various skill sets, and so they all define it differently. So for us, it's really about helping a customer understand how we want to engage. And for us, when we talk about being an MSI, we really talk about being a partner for the organizations we're working with, because we don't believe that installing a control system and integrating lighting and people counting, indoor air quality and your controls, and then leaving is done. That's what a system integrator does. That's what a controls contractor does. That is a good portion of our business, is doing those scopes, right? And they're defined by a contract. You win that contract. The contract has a finite period, and then you leave. And you might stick around for a warranty, but you're gone. To me, what separates that controls or system integrator away from an MSI is the MSI. The goal for an MSI really should be there to be that partner of that building owner for the life of the building, not just for the life of the contract or the term of the contract. It's really a partner that's helping them operate their facilities, especially when you start adding in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and you have other applications that are acting on data, acting on your building and making decisions for your building, or you a lot of times need some organization, some expert in the middle to help you interpret what's going on and either say, yes, this is the right thing and this is what we should be doing, or no, let's tweak it a little bit and let's make this happen over here. And that kind of expertise generally doesn't live within the operational or FM teams within an organization, or even within some of the FM providers that they might be subbing that work out to. And so I think an MSI comes in as that partner long-term to help them really operate these facilities to actually run as they were designed. We know that of the less than 10% of buildings in the world that actually have true automation, I probably would say it's 10% of those that actually run as designed, that actually have really good operational teams working with them every day and have, really good uptime, really good mechanical operations, really good, indoor air quality systems going on. I mean, even the building that we're in, has a hard time getting set point when people are here, or maintaining strong indoor air quality when there's some event going on outside. So there's lots of reasons that an MSI needs to be available, and not just, during the contract.
Yeah. I tend to think one problem statement or one problem that you find in buildings that an MSI service and solution provider would solve is just the fact that if you look at a building when it's built, you have a general contractor and then you have subcontractors focusing on every base building system. So you make a great point, set points, indoor air quality. You could argue my indoor air quality sensors are telling me I need to ventilate the space more as one way maybe to improve air quality. But you could step back to when the building was first constructed, say, well, the controls contractor was different than the HVAC contractor. There were no air quality sensors because that's something that was added later by the new owner or a tenant. And then you look at it and say, okay, so I have all these different silos of data and systems, equipment, every part of the stack, right? The hardware is separate, the software is separate, the provider deploying and using is separate. And an MSI can come in and say, well, actually, we can help you stitch all of this together.
Right. Yeah, and speak the language of all of those providers, right?
Yeah.
Granted, all MSIs have a background in something, right? And so our background is definitely in the automation side of the world, right? But we do have that process automation background as well. So we understand criticality of, oil fields, and we understand criticality of gigantic burners and the risk associated with not controlling them properly. And we understand data centers, and we understand hospitals, and we understand the built environment very well. So it's good to be able to have somebody that can come in the room, sit down with a controls contractor, with a mechanical contractor, with an electrical contractor, with other service providers, and say, look, we understand you all have input here. And then, yes, we're the ones that can sit in the room and start to see where the actual issues are. Because a lot of times people think the issue is with the controls, but it's not. And then they think it's with the mechanical, but maybe it's not. Maybe it was with the design. Maybe there's a slight design flaw that wasn't taken into account. Maybe there's some way that the ductwork was ran that's creating a problem in this one area of the room. Or maybe it's just airflow and there's some damper up there, that's some manual damper that's just been closed off over time. There's lots of like little things, but if you don't understand that all of those things are possible, then you end up chasing your tail. And we see that in a lot of times. And this is where, like I said, an MSI should be a partner for operating the building over the long term. And this is why I struggle with the whole way we procure MSIs. We try to procure an MSI the same way we procure a mechanical contractor or a controls contractor for a project. And we try to bid that out in the current kind of division specification type of thing. And I think that's where a lot of times it falls apart, because you're trying to derive value out of a plan and spec type of methodology. And that's not where an MSI truly is going to benefit you. They're going to benefit you in helping design, consulting. They're going to help you with the architecture. They're going to help you with sensors and locations, and they're going to help you with all kinds of things on the design side. And then they're going to help you with the deployment and implementation, working with the different controls contractors and mechanicals, electricals, making sure that all the systems and data is coming in. They're going to help you eventually with, the standardization of data and the reliability of data to be then used by applications. And hopefully, as I see it, they're going to start getting more involved with the business side of your business as well, and start making that data available, not just to operational applications, but also to business applications or maybe asset management, as we start to see more and more assets are delivering data. And those assets may or may not be part of what we would traditionally call something that we would have gotten data from as just an integrator or a system integrator, right? And so there's just a wealth of knowledge that we learn as we're doing these projects that is pretty specialized and standardized within the MSI community. And where 10 years ago, I would have said we were one of the few MSIs that really think of it that way. Today, I would say there's a lot more, and they didn't necessarily come from my background. They might have come from more of the business world or whatever. You're definitely seeing them come from everywhere.
Brian, I was going to ask a quick follow-up. I mean, talking about kind of like the market dynamics of MSIs, I think is interesting, because even a couple years ago, I would hear folks reference MSIs, but always very small. But before we get there, I was thinking as you were talking through, like, where you're coming from as an MSI will dictate to some degree where your subject matter expertise is. Coming from automation, coming from the business world, would you say there's a similar breakdown of MSIs of it's a new construction project, it's a heavy retrofit of an existing building, or it's just an existing building where the occupants of the building, they may be the owners and they may be tenants who just have a big influence in the building, they come to an MSI and say, I need everything to be integrated from day one, or I need everything to be integrated from year 5. Should those listening to this think about MSIs as, oh, you're good at new build, you're good at existing build?
It's the same way with contractors, right? So some contractors just really nail the new build. They understand core and shell. They don't even have to necessarily worry about the TI. There's some contractors that really focus on TI, right? They understand that very well, and they're very efficient. I would say MSIs should have more crossover than that. But I would say it depends on where you came into the MSI. If you came in from the business or engineering world, you might be more comfortable with the building that's already there and just start working with the different providers that are there. You come from construction world, which is more where we come from, and we've been part of that whole value chain the whole time, whether I was in distribution or contracting. And so we're very comfortable sitting in that room. And as you know, a construction meeting is not for everybody. The speed and the pace at which projects have to be developed, and the constant defending of your position and your value while people are trying to VE things out. An MSI can play a vital role in making sure that you're not stuck with a building that then has to have a bunch of new technology put in after the building's constructed because it was VE'd out, even though it was in the original design. So a strong MSI is very important in a construction process, because they can, if they're truly a partner of the developer and the owner, they understand what the end game is. And so they can fight for you the entire time during construction to make sure that end game is there, and not stick it on the operators to have to add it in afterwards. And so there's always that balance of first cost versus operational cost, right? And an MSI who truly understands the business of the builder, the developer, or potentially the tenant that's taking that suite is going to be able to have that view the whole time. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be stuck with it, because they're either going to have to explain why they weren't able to get it in the first place, and why it's now something you have to add afterwards, or they're going to be there, getting the value out of it, justifying like, look, I fought for this and we're going to use it for this purpose and that purpose. So yeah, I think,
Yeah. And
I, yeah.
yeah. And VE is value engineered or value engineering. And that's kind of the process of getting everything to a cost. And that usually means pulling out some value. I mean, I just wanted to define that term because some people listening are not.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, the new construction world is still so driven by that first cost metric, right? And I think a lot of times it's incentivized, right? So if you hit X cost, you'll get this bonus or whatever happens to be. And then there's also things that are time based, right? So you have to build this in 9 months, or you have to build this in 18 months. And so sometimes trying to get something done inside that might just not be practical or realistic. And I would say that that was a bigger problem maybe 10 years ago when it came to doing more operational technologies inside the new build. But today, I would say the amount of technology available, the relative normalized adoption of putting IT stuff in during construction and not waiting for post-construction pre-occupancy to actually get all IT infrastructure in there. I think the way we've moved that direction, plus the advent and more trust of more wireless protocols, I think has really started to, I would say, decrease the amount of value engineering that gets done on the operational technology side of new builds. But we're also seeing a lot fewer new builds, as a norm today. So I don't know if those two correlate or not.
Perhaps. So it's interesting that you talk about procurement issues. What about when you look at an MSI and you also look at controls contractors? Is there a problem with controls contractors labeling themselves as an MSI? Is people's perception of what an MSI is and is supposed to do, is that an us problem in terms of like how we're defining it, or again tied to some of the other issues within the space, smoke and mirrors? Or does it come from the end user in terms of like their own definition of what they need as an MSI?
So, like I said, every MSI has their background. They come up from somewhere. And the challenge with being an MSI only, with having an entire business that is only executing MSI work, no consulting work, no contracting work, no other level type of work, is one, there's just not enough of it out there. It's not normalized to the point where every single building owner or facility management group has a partner MSI company that they just bring along with them. So it's not to that level. So I would say it'd be disingenuous to suggest that there could be an organization out there that only is an MSI, unless the definition of MSI was so broad that really they're doing just about anything they want, right? And I think a lot of controls contractors do MSI work. The question then becomes, Lewis, are you willing to do MSI work alone? Are you willing not to if your core competency is controls contracting, are you willing to take a project where you're only the MSI and you're not the controls contractor? And to me, you have understanding how to work with somebody that you might consider a competitor on one project, but now they're a partner of yours on the next one because they are responsible for the controls. You're responsible for maybe, let's say, the horizontal integration of all the different vertical assets and vertical silos within a facility, either an existing facility or a new construction, a new build. And so you're having to work with all of them. And then the MSI generally, if it's contracted properly, should be direct to the GC. They should not be a subcontractor to one of the silos that they're expected to integrate, because the way that money flows, the way that authority flows, it needs to really be a partner of the GC. And the reason they don't want to be direct to the owners because they also don't want to be in conflict with the GC. You want the GC to actually be on the MSI's team and to feel like they're working together. And that doesn't matter if it's a retrofit of an existing building or a new build. I mean, you're going to have a power play, and so you want to be in the power stack, not adjacent to it, not where you're fighting it. And so I think it's a critical piece of the story. And then again, you want to have the relationship with the building owner or the FM that's going to operate afterwards, because again, an MSI wants to stay there to operate with the owner of the FM company. That's that. And you have to be willing to say, hey, we're a Distech dealer, right? And we're a Tritium dealer. Well, I might be working on a project as an MSI that's all ALC. And I have to be willing and capable of working with that controls contractor and not being one bit concerned that I didn't get to do any of the controls. When I talk about an MSI, everyone's saying they're an MSI when they're 99% of their business comes from controls. It starts to cloud the market because they're not really willing to do MSI alone. Their core business, the way they make money is selling controls and installing controls and servicing controls.
That's the point I was trying to get at. Just before Joe, you mentioned something there about the relationship between GCMC and all the other parties. I think it's worthwhile talking about like when during the cycle is the right time to engage, because I think there's a lot of question marks and people have different opinions around that. Would love to hear yours and I guess where you get best results.
Well, before I answer that, let Joe throw his comments in, and then we can move on to that one too.
Oh, I was going to kind of go a different direction, just in the fact that you had referenced there's MSIs within MSI teams or staff or experts within larger companies. That just seems to be a very interesting dynamic in the market where a lot of MSI firms are pretty small, right? I don't know that I would think of any company that's like, we have thousands of employees doing master systems integration. There are definitely companies with thousands of people that might have a handful of MSI experts. And then there's also a lot of kind of smaller innovators. I tend to think of, I wouldn't say startup in that you've raised a bunch of money, more just like smaller companies that are more nimble, that do MSI as kind of the core business. So I was heading down the path of just market, like what does the market look like from a landscaping point of view? And it seems like generally MSI teams are pretty small.
And they are. And the other big benefit that an MSI can bring to a GC is they can, because they do have expertise typically in one or more of the vertical silos that they're integrating, is they can be that third party. They can assist the commissioning team. They can be there to validate that the data is actually coming through. So MSIs aren't necessarily commissioning the sequence of operations. That's what commissioning agents and those firms are doing, and the mechanical engineers and design companies are helping with that. But they can actually commission all the data and make sure the data is actually passing through at the pace it's supposed to be. We've all gone on projects and it's like, well, we needed to have 17 points out of this VAV controller to do the proper analytics that are designed for the operations teams, but they only brought in 6. And now when we bring in the extra 11 across all the VAVs, we now kill the network, we overtax the head end, all of those things. So an MSI can provide value that we really haven't, let's say, documented as part of a construction team, whether it was, like I said, new construction or a retrofit, or just a tenant improvement. So there's lots of value that's there. So Lewis, back to your point. Sorry, just restate the question.
When, where, how to engage in MSI?
Our most successful MSI projects were engaged at 2 places. One by the design team, where we are pre-construction, right? So the design team is doing design documents. They're engaged with us on some small contract to provide oversight and documentation for what, maybe what network architecture, maybe there's a security problem that we want to solve or resolve. Maybe there's IT and wireless, and we're because we're partners with the owner, we understand their IT setup, and so we understand what kind of components have to be in there to work well with the systems that were being integrated as well as IT. So we'll work there, and then we're part of the construction team as well. So we have 2 different contract paths, and those are the most successful. If we get brought in too late, there might be some design things that were put in that are not conducive to a fully integrated solution. And so then we're trying to add it in during construction, which may or may not be cost effective, and may or may not be disruptive to the construction team who's already put bids in and have contracts for whatever was put in the plan spec. And so it's a lot better if the MSI is part of the design and then ultimately part of the construction team, and then part of the operations as well afterwards. So to me, get them in early. We can always figure out the contracting or the who's paying the MSI during each one of those phases. That can be worked out. But get them in early, have them part of the construction or the process of deployment, and then have them there for operations afterwards. It is the one company whose by design, they want to be there for all of it, and they want to stay with the building.
That actually raises a question I was thinking about. One challenge, it seems like, for MSIs, I mean, there's the challenge where the term, definitely if you're a systems integrator, which is a long-standing term and function role, MSIs are not exactly systems integrators, but it's easy to say, oh, we're an SI, and just you add the M and say we're an MSI. We've talked a little bit about that, and we can talk more about it, but it also strikes me, if you're, as an MSI, best positioned to help the GC, the subcontractors, but then you also referenced, Brian, operating the building, which probably includes a handover to an FM provider, or maybe the owner is self-performing and doing the FM. Are there challenges in that you as an MSI have to build relationships and be kind of in the core, not just like a peripheral influencer, like actually in the core, but through multiple handoffs across the building lifecycle, where you might have a great relationship with the GC, but then when the GC's done, they hand it over to an FM firm, and maybe you don't have a good relationship with the FM firm. It just strikes me that that's one challenge maybe in just scaling and delivering and kind of fulfilling the vision of what an MSI can do.
It is a challenge. However, once you can demonstrate the depth of knowledge you have about the building because you've been there from, let's say, design all the way through, the FM provider is actually not as difficult to engage with as you might think. And we've had success even with FM providers who have their own MSI team or smart buildings team internally, right? And so a lot of times we work with that team. Just because of our expertise on that building, they still engage with us. And we've had multiple year engagements with that kind of setup. So even though the big FM provider has a lot of internal expertise, they still work with us. And we've even had success where they've brought us into other opportunities. So again, we're always trying to build the value proposition for all of those stakeholders, not just for one. And we don't want to be confrontational with any of them. We don't find ourselves or believe that an MSI should be in a confrontational position for anybody. What we should be is there to defend the technologies required to operate the buildings most effectively. We're not there to put technology in for technology's sake. We are there to understand the value proposition. We're to understand the business outcomes that the owner, developer, FM provider is actually required to execute. And we're there to make sure that we have the right tech and the right people in the room to get those things done. And that's ultimately what we're there for. I think many years ago, an MSI could have been confused or even accused of just adding technology for technology's sake. Oh, you think we need an indoor air quality system sensor in every single office? Well, 20 years ago, they would have said we were definitely just trying to spend money. Nobody could afford to do that. Today, cost has come way down. However, but use cases, healthy building, well-being of humans, and actually, prioritizing human comfort and making that part of the tenant experience is actually really important and high on people's, list of level of importance. And so now when we talk about putting indoor air quality, it's more about how do we get it delivered for the best cost, for the lowest cost, and deliver the highest amount of value, right? So this is where the invention of wireless technologies has really come in. And so now I've got 15 different wireless protocols I could support. Well, which one actually will pass muster on a security perspective? Are there any of them that have risk associated with hacking or those sorts of things from IT's perspective? So, and again, that's another area where MSIs are going to have tested and done the value proposition to understand how IT wants it to work, because they understand the business of the building, not just my control system or my power meters or my lighting controls, right?
Just on security, specifically cybersecurity, is that one of the big focuses across any MSI project?
Of course. Yeah. So I would say that, in new construction many years ago, being a system integrator, worrying about IT was really not that big a deal. It was always, like I said, post-construction, maybe even post-occupancy, that IT was really there. Now, it's part of every conversation. It's part of every decision. It should be part of the design. The IT organizations of the operator, whether it's an owner-operator or the building's being built for a tenant to take over, they're engaged early on now. And I was involved with a project right now where maybe that was done too late in the game. And so now they're taking out brand new switches and putting in brand new switches because IT wasn't engaged early enough. And so, but I think more and more that's being dealt with. We're engaging IT early. You want to have those conversations there. And if I'm an MSI and I come into a project, whether it's during design or during construction or wherever, I'm going to ask those questions about IT early on. And I'm going to uncover whether or not IT has had their voice heard, because it will be heard. And the sooner IT's voice is heard, the better for everybody, right? Because it's going to be heard. And you just don't want it to be heard the day that the tenant takes occupancy, because then it's chaos.
Okay, interesting. Couple of points just on that before we move on. Obviously, data's uber important, more than ever now. How do you see the role of data evolving within the context of MSI?
Yeah, well, I think I alluded to earlier, where the MSI should be the commissioning or the ultimate owner of the data, and the data reliability and the data consistency and the data integrity. Because if you don't have those things, AI is useless. So you can come in and say, well, I've got this great AI application. I go, great, I got a garbage trunk full of data. I can't tell you if it's any good, but throw your AI on it and you'll do magic.
Yeah, there's so many good memes about this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so many.
Yeah. So, and it's real. It's not, memes, a lot of them can seem like they're exaggerating, but that's one that they're not. Garbage data is bad for everything. It's bad for operating a building. It's bad for any kind of application you want to run on it. You think about the asset management side of the world, people are making decisions on how to spend money tomorrow and 5 years from now and 10 years from now based on information they have right now. So if we give them crappy information right now, they're going to make bad decisions for 5 years, right? And so it's super important. And when we can tie real asset data, and if we know that an air handler should last 15 years and should only lose 8% of its efficiency over those 15 years, and we're not tracking that and we can't validate it, then how can you reliably make a decision that that equipment's going to replace in 15 years only to see it need to be replaced in 8 years because you didn't operate it well, you didn't service it well, you didn't do all the things. So there's so much more than just, do we have the right controls, do we have the right sensors, do we have the right data? It's much bigger than that, and that's the real value that MSI can bring, is partnering with that company to partner with that holistic view. Not just talk about it, but actually look, okay, in order to have this, we've got to have all these things downstream performing well. I can't have 30% of your controllers offline not sending good sensor data. I can't have 50% of your indoor air quality sensors failed, right? We've actually got to be tracking, monitoring, maintaining this stuff so that when we're trying to make decisions that are real money, real business down the road, we're making it with a lot of really good data, right? And that's where it really comes into play.
Okay, I was going to ask, I think I probably know the answer based on what you just said there, but I think MSI is arguably one of the hardest jobs to do, right? Like, I'm coming from a position where I've not done it myself, but I've heard challenges and just what goes into any project. How would you make an MSI role easier? Is it better data, or is there other aspects that in an ideal world you'd have changed?
It's funny, to me, it's the most interesting job in the stack, right? Because again, you're getting to test and work with new technologies. You're getting to work with experts in every one of the fields. I'm not an expert in every one of the verticals. I'm certainly not an expert all the way down to the nth degree on all these verticals. But when I get to work with them, you learn stuff that's new all the time. You learn about how we can have interactions between data. We're understanding use cases that we didn't know existed 5 years ago because we have somebody that's actually putting all these people in the same room. So to me, making it easier, it's always going to be difficult because humans are there, and I think MSI and the concept of having somebody work across the horizontal layer of all of these vertical silos is scary to some people because they think they're losing some semblance of control. And so that's the thing I'd like to get off the table, is don't be afraid. There's no MSI that can come in and perform all those verticals and do it well. I don't care how big of an organization you are. If you're not focused, if you don't have a primary focus that leads and governs your business every single day, you're not going to be the best at it. And it doesn't matter if you have 20,000 employees or 20 employees. It's got to be what governs your business. What do you talk about in your internal meetings? How are you talking about your company to your team and to the outside world, right? Because if you're not that consistently, then you just can't be perfect at it. You can't be great at it. And so to the companies that I would say that, they're 20,000 employees and they've got 20 people who really understand MSI, those 20 people are never going to be the ones driving the 20,000, right? And and so and so to me, it's about just getting rid of that risk, that they believe that some MSI is going to kind of take the stuff that there's core to their business. Like, I am never going to be able to come and take somebody's electrical job from them, or really even a large controls customer job, if my sole responsibility is being the MSI and being that company's partner on how to get all that data up to the application, into the asset level, helping them make better business decisions. Because all of that stuff takes a lot of my time, a lot of expertise. I have to have different kinds of skill sets in my team. I can't be worried about, am I going to get the next VAV job, right? That's not my focus as an MSI. And this is where, when you say what would make it easier, it'd be a whole lot easier if it was just accepted that an MSI was part of the the discussion all the time. Right now, it's too much confusion on what's an MSI anyway. I'll just hire a controls contractor, right? And MSIs like us haven't done a good enough job of really describing the value proposition, not just for the construction, but also for the long-term operation of the building. And so that's that's what I wish was done already, because then I wouldn't have to spend my time trying to educate the market on that, in that regard. Um, but it's not yet, and so this is what we get to do still.
Do you see, yeah, do you see the visibility or the level of understanding of buyers and consumers of MSI solutions getting better? I mean, are we moving in the right direction even if we're moving slowly? Or
Yeah, I would say it needs acceleration, but I see it getting better. And I would say one of the benefits of, the carbon conversation, ESG. I know there's been a lot of negative publicity about ESG and carbon in the last couple of years, mostly because of greenwashing and all of that. But there's been a huge amount of benefit from that conversation, and people are understanding that they need to actually focus on operations of these systems, and they need the data. They're required to report on the data, and then they go and try to get the data, and they're like, "Oh crap, this data is garbage." Like, I've had 35% of my systems are offline. I didn't even know it. And especially with COVID, with the buildings being largely unoccupied, they really had systems that were down that they just didn't even know about. And so having somebody that is constantly watching that, and it's easy to say, well, isn't the FM provider supposed to do that? I don't know. Are they? I don't see those contracts. To me, the FM provider is responsible for the facility. And guess what? The facility has a lot of stuff that isn't driving data. You know, they're responsible for the door working. They're responsible for the elevator actually functioning. They're
the cafeteria?
responsible, exactly. And there's so much they're responsible for. So it's impossible for me to say the FM providers have failed with respect to this because they couldn't get all the data perfect. Well, was that anywhere in their contract? Did they come in and say, we'll make sure that all your data quality is there for all your operational systems? Was that part of it? Probably wasn't, because people weren't thinking like that. And so that's where I think things are changing, and that's where I think an MSI, a really good MSI who likes that attention to detail around data, can really be a benefit and a partner to the FM companies, regardless, and leave them in control and add to their skill set rather than somehow be adversarial to them.
Interesting. We didn't mention this earlier, but I said I'd touch on it. Over the last 12 months, there's been some changes on your end. I think it's worthwhile just quickly highlighting OTI, Buildings IoT, for those that are listening.
Yeah. So we sold Buildings IoT to InfoGrid a few months ago. They've rebranded as Noda. They several of our developers and engineers went over there with them, and I think Kate Henningsen and team, which includes a lot of our senior team that went over, going to do a great job, and I look forward to seeing what they do. A lot of the stuff that I worked really hard on the last 9 years is over there, kind of out of my control, but I have a lot of confidence that they're going to continue building and have a great product for buildings. And I'm certain, as an MSI, at some point we'll cross paths again, but they're not a technology I currently represent. But like I said, I'm sure that at some point they'll be in a building I'm working with.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question, not so much about that specific history, but obviously my newsletter, our firm's newsletter, covers a lot of the M&A. It's hard to say there's been an increase or a decrease in M&A just because there's not enough data points maybe to say we see an increase, but there definitely have been some notable deals over the past couple months. As an MSI, one of the things I hear from buyers, like I own buildings or I operate buildings, is the market is too fragmented. do you tend to see more M&A in the future of the technology, the application layer, as a likely outcome? Maybe not, like there's definitely going to be more M&A, but do you think that's maybe a feasible hypothesis? But also, does it help you do what you do as an MSI if there are fewer vendors to pick from to go learn about? Because I would argue that's one of the reasons we haven't seen as much adoption. It's too hard to figure out what should I buy. But I'm interested from an MSI point of view, like of that market dynamic.
It's crazy. There's too many products out there. If I'm an owner and I don't have an MSI who's done a lot of the research, who's worked with a lot of different products, it'd be very difficult for me to decide one sales deck over another one. And we know that people still buy from people, and so there's a lot of great people that are also part of these sales teams. And so a lot of times you're like, well, I like both of them, all right? I like both the people. They both say the right things. They both look like they have the right product, and you really don't know until you've executed a project with them. And so as an MSI, we can be the voice of reason. We can ask the hard question. We can ask the questions that the owners don't know to ask, right? About how something's deployed, about what their track record is around how they would solve a specific use case. And we can ask those problems, and we can hear the answers, and we can interpret the answers in a way that an owner can't, right? And so I think, so as an MSI, I love having the choice. I love, one thing that's a little bit freeing from being the manufacturer of a software product, acting as an MSI, is that I have the choice to make a technology solution selection for a customer. I can hear what their use case or their outcome is that they want, and then I can understand, okay, this product over here is going to fit very well for you, versus me saying, I have a product, I can solve your use case, right? And then they say, well, have you done this one before? No, but I can. Or yes, I've done this one over here, and here's how I'll tweak it to fit yours, right? Now as an MSI, I can just say, you know what? I haven't done that before, but I know there's a product over here that does that. Let's go explore this thing. Let's bring them in. Let's talk to them about how they solve that problem. And then as an MSI, we can be there to solve it for them. And so it's a little bit freeing. That honestly is the exciting part about being an MSI, is that you get exposed to all these different technologies. You're not locked into any one. And most of the time, because an MSI does get to make those kinds of recommendations, a lot of the technology providers bring us in. They want to know, they want to ask us, hey, what could we do better? What could we do different to solve these kinds of use cases? And so, from the creative side of our world, or my desire is to help contribute back to what these products do. I get to fill that void as well, because I'm getting those conversations going, right? Whether it's with the guys at Code or Navant or Acuity, even we're getting to have those level of conversations.
Well, I think we'll wrap up there. But Brian, really appreciate you coming on here. I know it's super busy. Final point or final question, real quick. Any trends, if I have to force you, any trends?
For the new year for 2025, yeah.
Over 2025. We're 9 days in, 10 days in with the new administration. So,
I've posted a few things on LinkedIn about this administration. The only thing I can say so far is it's unpredictable with what they're going to do. And obviously with the news with AI yesterday and watching the market kind of get hit pretty bad. I think what's going to happen, there will be consolidation. There will be some software technologies that just don't make it. I think 25 is going to be a reckoning for that. To Joe's earlier point, this industry, the built environment with the relative slow adoption, just generally speaking, even if it goes 50 times faster than normal, it's still slow relative to what technology is used to. We're just not going to be able to sustain 500 analytics products, and 500 AI products that are going to change set points in your building to save energy. So there's going to be consolidation and just reduction overall. And there's going to be some winners. And I think those winners will be more clear a year from now than they are right now. And I think companies like us and other MSIs who are maybe you haven't heard of are going to start to be more prominent in the world. And I think that there will be some companies that, some household names that everybody's heard of, the big ones, and even the big controls contractors. They'll still be doing their thing, but I think you're going to start seeing some smaller companies you haven't heard of before that are suddenly in this MSI conversation, and they're going to provide a lot of value. And I do think that MSIs are going to be more of a commonplace in facilities and for FM teams. I think people are recognizing that this is truly a specialty that needs focus. It's not just something you also do, and that's what I think is going to happen. And I think we're going to start seeing people back in buildings at a much higher rate than we have in the last 3 years. So I think people have recognized that while there's definitely benefit to working from home and having that flexibility, there's also a tremendous amount of benefit about being in the space together and working together and collaborating as teams. So I think those two things, that's probably the end of my guesses on what trends are going to happen. So I'm sure a year from now, Joe's going to remind me, well, what I was right and wrong about.
Yeah, those tend to be good predictions, and I'm seeing the same things. And then like the second order effects, more people in the office, does that drive more adoption of technology? Because if you remember in 21, maybe early 22, there were a lot of, among other technology platforms or solutions, there were a lot of tenant engagement solutions that were really doing well. And I think a lot of that was the owners of the buildings, the operators of the buildings trying to front end the return to office. Let's make the building more attractive so you come back. But then what ended up happening was people were not coming back. And so then the next step was, why did we buy this solution to get people back to the office when they're not coming back? We don't need that, or we can't spend that much money on that anymore. But now if they actually come back, you might go back to, we want to invest in technology now. And I've definitely talked to folks who have done, like real estate folks at large companies, who have said, if everyone comes back, we don't have space for them. We just know we do not have enough space for them. But it seems like the approach now is like, get everyone to come back and then figure out how to where to put them.
Yeah,
which will probably
flex workspace, and they're doing flex schedules. They're doing like, hey, you're in Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday. So they're doing lots of things, and I think those are all good things. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on the buildings to make sure they have good operational systems, good data, better planning. There's a lot of things. So I think I think the industry is going to be strong for the next several years. So anyway, but hey, it was great catch up with you guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
It's wonderful.
It's fun as always.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks, Brian.
All right.